You're listening to Coffee and Sports from Wire to Wire Sports Network on the National Streaming Sports Roku channel.
Sports. It is the morning show powered by Wire to Wire Network. Thank you so much for making us part of your morning routine. I am Chris, and of course, that over there, that is Mo. Partner, happy Tuesday, sir.
Happy Tuesday to you, partner, and everybody out there joining us.
Mo, the Harbaugh Bowl was last night. So I don't know, maybe, and I don't have anything against either of these teams or either of these coaches. They made such a big deal of it. I don't like they were showing like ESPN and it was showing like footage of them growing up. Like I don't like. I guess I missed the boat on this being such a big deal. It was cool that this is the third time they were playing against each other. That was I like them both as coach. Like, but it was just like a huge deal for some reason. And I was watching all the game coverage of it. And there was a couple of times where I was just like, this is just a Monday Night Football game, guys. Like, there's nothing crazy happening here. But there's like a lot of pop and circumstance. But okay, it's cool. Like, I get it. All right, fine. But the Ravens go in there. John is now 3-0 against his brother Jim after taking down the Chargers on Monday Night Football. It was a slow start for Baltimore, but they get the win in the end. Dominant fourth quarter by the Ravens. They were down by one going into the fourth. They score a touchdown pretty early. They score a second touchdown midway through, and they controlled the fourth quarter, Mo. The Chargers didn't get their score until the very end of the game. At that point, the game was already over, so it didn't really matter. Lamar played well. King Henry played well. I thought it was a nice win for the Baltimore Ravens. They better beat the Pittsburgh Steelers next time they play them. That's all I'm saying there. Because no one's going to be talking about the Ravens beating the Chargers on Monday Night Football. But it was a nice measuring stick game. I think if you were the Chargers and you weren't embarrassed by any stretch of the imagination, I think this game was much more valuable for the Chargers in the sense of, you know, there's been so many games and so many times with the Chargers and their quarterback where you look at it and you say, is Herbert really the guy? Can Herbert win a big game? I know he didn't win here, but you look at the Chargers, especially coming out of last season and the mess that they were. I don't think the Chargers by any means, Mo, are a fraud at 7-4. I think they are a legitimate playoff contender, and I think they lost to a better team. If you ask me today, or even if you asked me before the game yesterday, do I think the Chargers are on the same level as the Ravens? I would have said no. I would say looking at the AFC, I think it's fair if you put the Bills and the Chiefs and I'm missing someone? Ravens. Bills, Chiefs, Ravens. I think that's the top tier. I think those are the ones. Now, I might even argue the Chiefs are on their own tier. But if I'm being fair, and I'm not just putting the Chiefs by themselves, I think it would be Bills, Chiefs, Ravens. That's tier one. And then everyone else is kind of in tier 2 or tier 3 after that. I still don't think the Chargers are in tier 1. I didn't think they were beforehand. I don't think they are now. I think they're going to probably make the playoffs. And I think that they can be competitive. And at any given Sunday, Mo, could they beat one of those three teams? Absolutely. But I just don't think they're quite at that level yet. And I think that's the same way I feel this morning.
I came away from that game not surprised with the results, but if you told me coming into year one of the Jim Harbaugh era that the Chargers will have the type of season where they might barely miss the playoffs, I would tell you that they're ahead of schedule in year one. So I think the Chargers are ahead of schedule. Whether they make the playoffs or not, I think Jim Harbaugh has them pointed in the right direction. And as far as Justin Herbert, Yeah, I mean, I think there were still questions about him, not about his talent, but about is he the guy? But I think he is the guy. And I think he's the guy because he's been married to the guy. He now has his guy, right? I think him and Jim Harbaugh, that's the marriage going forward. I think the Chargers, the future is bright for them going forward, and I'm with you. I think they're a team that will probably make the playoffs. Do I think they're a team that could go on a great run and be in the conference championship? No, I don't think they're there yet. But the results of the game, again, like I said, it didn't shock me. I thought coming into the game, the Ravens were the better, more talented football team. The better, more talented football team won the football game. As far as the buildup of the Harbaugh Bowl, it didn't bother me as much. I get it. They were trying to add some fluff and the backstory and stuff like this. But the way I looked at it is they're probably going to meet a few more times in their careers. Are we going to roll this out every time they meet?
I hope not.
You know what I mean? I hope not. I mean, once is more than enough. And obviously, now that they're going to be in the same conference, they're not going to play each other in the Super Bowl again. So it'll be interesting going forward. Like I said, I watched the game. I thought the Ravens did just enough offensively after a slow start, and they were better than they have been defensively. So hats off to the Ravens. But I look at the AFC, and what's interesting, even though I respect the defending champions, there is no dominant team in the AFC. I think
No.
I think the Chiefs could repeat. I also think they're vulnerable enough to where they could get upset. I really believe that. So if Mahomes pulls this off, to me, it would be his most impressive Super Bowl run.
Isn't this the same stuff we've been saying that if Mahomes can do this, if the Chiefs and Mahomes can win a Super Bowl with no name on the defense, how impressive would that be? If the Chiefs and Mahomes can win a Super Bowl with literally no weapons on offense besides an aging Travis Kelce, if the Chiefs and Mahomes have to actually go on the road and that's their path and that's how they have to win. Mo, we keep playing that if game with Patrick Mahomes and he keeps coming up aces. I'm just saying.
Well, I'm always trying to give the rest of the conference a chance.
That's nice to you. It's nice to you. But in all fairness, you know, there is a dominant team, two dominant teams, I would argue, in the NFC, in the Detroit Lions, and Saquon Barkley is going to keep doing what that man is doing right now, and the Philadelphia Eagles, or is you just don't have that in the AFC, despite what Baltimore Raven fans and Buffalo Bills fans want to tell you. I'm sorry, neither of your teams are a dominant team. Knock it off. You're just good teams as of right now. Step down and control yourselves. Mo, let's do a quick blitz through the action from this past weekend. Let's start with the Eagles and the Rams. Man, the Rams are Jekyll and Hyde, Mo. 1 week, I think they're going to the playoffs. The next week, I'm like, geez. And this was an geez week. It was back and forth in the first half, and the Eagles just slammed the door in the second half. And dear Lord, they could not stop Saquon Barkley. If they all had $10 million bonuses on the line, that man was running like a man possessed, 255 yards on the ground. Dear God, that man is insane. The Eagles have definitely put themselves into the conversation for best team in the NFC. And Mo, I said this yesterday, I might give it to them because I think that if Saquon is going to continue to play at this high level, he is a better running back than their running back room in Detroit. But I look at the Eagles and I just say, I don't trust Nick Sirianni. So for that reason and that reason alone, I still have them just behind Detroit, but it's closer. I think it's as close as it's been right now so far this season, but I still give a slight nod to Detroit.
I think overall talent is really close, and I'm with you. Detroit has two really good running backs. I think those two running backs make up Saquon Barkley. But the Eagles have Saquon Barkley.
Right.
And as good as Detroit's offensive line is, I think the Eagles' offensive line is better. We always say marry the coach to the quarterback. The marriage of Saquon Barkley to that offensive line is perfect. It is perfect. And if you don't overcomplicate things, I'm talking about Nick Sirianni and the Eagles' offensive coordinator, you hand the ball to Saquon Barkley 25, 26, 30 times a game. That formula, more times than not, that's going to lead you to victories. I think if those teams should meet, I think that's going to be a back and forth football game. Maybe a slight edge to the Lions because I think that their passing game is a little bit more diverse. But I can see the Eagles winning that football game. I think I literally think it's 50-50. I think that could go either way. I think if the Eagles simplify things and go to what works and doesn't get away from it, look, I can see them winning that football game. I think it's going to be a really great game. If that matchup actually occurs, I'm here for it, but I think it could go either way.
Tough day for the San Francisco 49ers. The Green Bay Packers just outclassed the 49ers on Sunday. Obviously didn't help that Brock Purdy wasn't back there. And then, of course, the smack talk, Mo, after the game with one of the secondary players for the Packers talking about, well, we won 3 games without our starting. Okay, great.
They did.
You did it. I don't know how you did it. I still don't know how you did it. How you were winning games with Malik back there, but somehow you pulled it off. Props to you because, Mo, we're in the same boat. Your offense looked just as good as our offense in Miami looked when Tua wasn't there for 4 games. So
yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Well, I saw a stat yesterday. The Dolphins averaged 11.1 points. 11.1 points without Tua. They're averaging 28.7 with him. It's crazy how
all
night
I know
and
is
day that is.
All I know is since Tua's been back, he's just flinging the football everywhere. And I think it's great that Tyreek accepts the fact that they might be better if they're not Tyreek centric. It's working because he's getting more guys involved and he's not locking in on just Tyreek. That formula is going to work. And at some point, Tyreek's going to get unlocked. He's going to make some big plays. He's just not going to replicate the year that he had last year. And that's okay. If it leads them to victories, I think he's on board with that.
Yeah, I think that's what he realizes, Mo. I think Tyreek understands that they keep feeding Jonnu Smith and they keep feeding Devon Achane and they keep feeding Waddle. There's going to be those 1 or 2 moments a game where they kind of forget about Tyreek Hill because they're not going to double Tyreek every play when there's 3 other guys on the field beating them. So there's going to come a point, and especially when you get it on tape for 3 or 4 weeks where they're like, listen, we can't get beat by Waddle on the in route on the right side. They've been going to that 4 games in a row. We got to get a couple of guys on Waddle, or when they line up Achane coming out, we can't get a linebacker on him. We got to get a corner on him. Well, what are we going to do about Tyreek? They're not throwing Tyreek anymore. Like, we're getting beat. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Speed always kills. And, as teams, so what you're looking at now with Miami is teams adjusted. And we saw this kind of towards the end 2 years ago. And we saw this definitely after the Bronco game last season, is that teams adjusted their defense and they said, you're not going to beat us deep with Tyreek and Waddle. Now, did they still have some success at the end of last season? Yes, they did. Was it anywhere near the first half of last season? No, it wasn't. And coming into year 3 of this Mike McDaniel offense, you've seen it the entire season this year, is teams have said, we're going to play zone. We're not going to give you those one-on-one matchups with Tyreek on the left side and have him just burn us all day. And you're going to have to adjust. Well, finally, it took a little bit of time, but Mike McDaniel and company has adjusted. And this offense finally uses a tight end, and Jonnu Smith is flourishing his last 3 or 4 games with Tua. You're finally seeing Waddle used not just as a deep threat, but an all over the field threat. And with the emergence of Devon Achane last season, he's also a tremendous receiving back. You're seeing a completely different offense. Now, does that mean that Tyreek's never going to catch another deep pass? No. It just means that this is the chess move. The league adjusted to Tua and Mike McDaniel about a season and a half ago. It took them a minute to adjust back. Well, here they are. They've adjusted back. But Mo, the chess move is league, be careful. Because now there's 2 versions of this Dolphins offense that have worked really, really well. The Tyreek Waddle version, where it was deep bombs 5 or 6 times a game that broke your back, we've seen that work. Now we're seeing this version work. Whatever the league does to adjust to this, you better be careful, because if you adjust too far and open up version 1 again, they know how to run that version and they'll go back to it. So now you need to adjust in a way where you're not allowing version 1 to be too successful or version 2 to be too successful. And Mo, that's why I think the Dolphins offense is in a good place moving forward, because now you're seeing them do something completely different as far as what their offensive identity is, and it's working just as efficiently as what they were initially doing in this Mike McDaniel system. So now if you're the league, what do you do? And what do you do when you can literally be killed by 4 different offensive weapons? Because you can sit here and say all you want, well, Achane catching the ball, it's not really a weapon. Okay. He had a wide open walk. He had 2. He basically had 1 screen touchdown pass against the Patriots where he just weaved his way through 9 yards of garbage to find the end zone. And then when they went back down there again, the Patriots completely forgot to cover the guy. Like, after he already scored a touchdown on you, they were just so focused on covering the other 3 weapons in the red zone, Waddle, Hill, and Smith. They forgot completely to cover Achane coming out of the backfield, and the man literally skipped into the end zone untouched. And isn't that the issue that this Dolphins offense is going to present defenses, is how do you consistently cover all 4? Because all 4 can break this game open and have been these past 5 weeks. I know they lost the Arizona game, they lost the Buffalo game, but since Tua's come back, it's been humming with all 4 of them. So that's the question, Mo. How do you consistently cover all 4? And the answer is you don't. The answer is you get to Tua before he realizes which one's open. But that's also the solution if you're the Dolphins, because he throws the damn ball so quickly, Mo. He's going through his progressions and finding which one is the open one so fast that defenses aren't touching him. And yes, if he holds the ball for more than 3 seconds, is it usually not good? I agree. It really isn't.
Right.
But when he gets it out quickly and he finds that open man quickly, you're not going to touch him. The man's completing over 70% of his passes in the 5 games since he's been back. Y'all better figure something out quickly. And I get it. Green Bay is going to be a measuring stick, Mo, but I'm not concerned right now. I don't think they're going to get blown out. They may not win the football game, but and maybe this is what normal football fans feel, Mo. It's weird for a Dolphin fan, but it's pretty cool to be like, I'm not concerned. We may not win, but we're not getting blown out by anyone right now, unless it's Buffalo. But aside from that, we good.
Yeah, I remember I used to know what that felt like. These are different times. But you know what? You can put a spin on it. First of all, let me acknowledge the Dolphins. I just think their offense is more diverse. Tua doesn't have a favorite target. Everybody is his favorite target. And that's what makes them scarier, because on a given day, multiple guys could have 5 or 6 receptions. I've been watching, and you go down the stats, and he's throwing the football to 9, 10 different guys. That's crazy that he's spreading the ball out like that. But I think that that gives defenses more things to think about because it puts everybody in play. So I do think the Dolphins offense is really scary. The matchup against Green Bay is going to be intriguing. I think it might be a shootout. And I still think if it is a shootout, I think that favors Miami. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, he targeted 10 different receivers against the Patriots. And let's not forget, um, and 3 of those targets went to Odell Beckham Jr. and he dropped 3 balls. So get it together, OBJ.
Right.
we're gonna jettison you out of that offense. You keep dropping Tua's passes. Dear God. And he dropped Tua. I don't know if you saw it. Tua put a beautiful one in his breadbasket going up the sideline late in the game. It would have been like a 25, 30-yard completion. My man catches the ball and just loses it before he hits the ground. OBJ. It's wild. Absolutely wild. As far as the Niners go, though, I get it. The Packers had success with their backup. Most teams don't. And I think the issue with Miami and San Francisco is it is very much a timing offense. And although, we get on teams like Carolina for building an offense that doesn't necessarily, reciprocate the strengths of their quarterback. I think that Miami and San Francisco have an offense that does represent the strengths of their starting quarterback. It just doesn't represent the strengths of their backup quarterbacks.
No.
And that's not the end of the world. I mean, it's a bigger deal in Miami because Tua gets hurt more often, but it is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, okay. If you're watching the Patriots game on Sunday, they pull Tua because the Dolphins are up, 31-7, and Skylar Thompson comes in and they turn the ball over in 3 plays. Like, and then Tua comes right, and I get it. Like, was I a little annoyed? Absolutely. Like, you can't even get the handoff exchange right with the right. Come on now. But it is what it is. Like, the Dolphins don't have a competent backup quarterback. Should they have one with Tua's injury history? Yeah, they should, but they don't. I think that San Francisco has a better backup quarterback as far as just, not being able to turn the ball over, but they don't have one that's going to lead them to victories.
No.
They don't have a gunslinger on the bench like a Gardner Minshew, who you're like, all right, let's strap it up with Gardner. I think we can go win this. I don't think either of us have that situation. But it is what it is. It's a timing-based offense. It is very much predicated on QB1 being in there. And that's just the world we live in, Mo. If QB1's not playing, it's a completely different looking offense.
And it still would have been an uphill battle anyway. Your Ayuk's gone for the year. The offensive line isn't what it had been in previous seasons. Kittle played and he wasn't even 80%, but he played anyway. I mean, good on him for showing up anyway, trying to compete. The defense is nowhere near what it's been the last 3 or 4 years. It is not. It is not imposing. It is not dominating. Teams are eating on it through the air, on the ground, you name it. They just can't stop anybody. And so I really think it's weird that I think our teams have the same records, but we're going in different directions. You guys are trending to where you're trying to get into the postseason, and it looks like we're trending to get out of the postseason. I'm like you, though. You're the one that put up the magical number, so I'm not going crazy. I'm like, well, we're not at 8 losses yet, so never say never. The only problem is in that particular division, I don't know if you have to wait till you get 8 losses to be out of it because the division is so bottled up. That's ugly, and I just think it's a down year for the Niners. Is the season over? No, but sometimes your season is lost in the off season when you have issues and stuff, right? It all that stuff carries over into the regular season. What did we say that happens all the time when some guy holds out and he finally gets his money and then he jumps right into playing without like taking the time to get into shape and to get his body right? They always end up with some type of injury. Ayuk gone, right? Like that happens almost all the time. So I don't sweat it. The Niners have had a lot of success in recent years. This is clearly a regression and a down year. I don't think it's a panic thing. I think you accept the year for what it is. And maybe should they lose a couple more games, you put in some of your younger players to see what you do have depth-wise going forward into next season. So that's how I look at it, because I think even if Purdy played, Chris, beating the Packers would have been a very much an uphill battle because the defense is just as porous as it is.
The one thing the Niners do have going for them, though, is that division. The Arizona Cardinals lose to the Seattle Seahawks. It wasn't a bad game for the Arizona Cardinals. It was a horrible game for the Arizona Cardinals. Mo, this was my most disappointing team of the entire weekend. The Cardinals had a chance to do so many great things right here. They win this game, and by default, with what else happened in their division, they would be 2 games up on the
Right.
entire division. The entire division. That's the swing that was missed by losing this game. You went from a chance to be 2 games up on your entire division to tied with Seattle with the rest of the division 1 game behind you because you couldn't take care of business, and you looked absolutely abysmal in your attempt to beat the Seattle Seahawks. Not only do they miss going 2 games up in their division, Mo, but like we talked about last week, they're not in that conversation. They could have been in the conversation of, all right, Detroit, Philly, who else? Who else has a
Right.
chance in the nobody in that division is in that conversation right now
Oh, I
because
agree.
none of them are playing well. But had the Cardinals come out and beat Seattle, you would have to look at Arizona and be like, they beat Miami. They won 4 in a row here. Like they're coming. They're making their way through that division. They got a 2-game lead now, so they're pulling away from the pack in their division. Kyler's playing good football. No, that's all out the window. And now you look at the division, you say, who plays each other last? Like, because by default, like, who is just going to be the last team standing? Because they're just beating up on each other, and none of them look particularly great. And that's where they are right now. So disappointing game for Arizona. Props to Seattle. They started off 3-0. They lost 5 of 6. Now they're finding their mojo again. I don't trust Seattle either. I don't trust any team in this division. I talked a little earlier in the show. I don't trust the Rams. We don't trust the San Francisco 49. No one in
I
that
don't.
division has
I
any
don't.
trust. But someone's got to win the division.
At
No one
some
else,
point.
at
Right.
some point, no one else from that division is going to the playoffs. So we'll see what the last 5 or 6 weeks bring. Bo Nix. Bo Nix is a good young quarterback, Mo. I haven't given Bo Nix enough credit this season. I know it was just the Raiders. I watched that entire game because as a Dolphin fan, I have a rooting interest in the Broncos losing football games. They are considerably better than the Raiders. But Bo Nix plays good football. Do I think that they're going to beat, a couple of the bigger teams coming up on their schedule? No, I still don't think they're that good. But they're a solid team. They are going to contend for a wild card for the rest of the season. And good on Sean Payton. Because we did not give Denver, Mo, much credit coming into this season.
We didn't.
But good on Sean Payton and that Broncos staff. If you told me they were going to win 7 games, I would have been like, 7-10, not a bad season. No, they're sitting at 7-5 right now. So good for them, Mo.
They've been one of the big surprises of the season. Yes, you have to give Sean Payton, the quarterback coaches, and the guys that work with Bo Nix a lot of credit. And we're talking a lot about Jaden Daniels, who's been sensational. I would argue that the last few weeks, Bo Nix has been just as good. And I think Denver has found their guy. And so the fact that they're 7-5 with the opportunity to make the playoffs, the same way I feel like the Chargers are a little bit ahead of schedule, I think the Broncos are as well.
Speaking of the Commanders, they lose to the Dallas Cowboys, and they've now lost 3 games in a row from 7-2 to 7-5. They got to figure something out in Washington, Mo, because the ship is starting to take on water. And you're seeing the last 3 weeks, you're seeing more rookie looks from Jaden Daniels. You're seeing more of the inexperience from Jaden Daniels. And I get it. There's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be moments, because he is a rookie quarterback, where he makes mistakes as he continues to grow and he continues to develop. But this was a 7-2 team, and we were given a lot of hype to this 7-2 team. And now they have slipped to a 7-5 team. And as you look at the schedule still favors them. They got the Titans and the Saints coming up. Those are very winnable games. They win those 2 games, Mo, and they go to 9-5, and everything is right once again in Washington, and we're not having this conversation. After they play the Titans and the Commanders, they got the Eagles and the Falcons. Those will be the 2 most challenging games they face on the rest of their schedule. And then they close the season with the Dallas Cowboys, who you would say that's a very winnable game, but they just lost to the Dallas Cowboys. So I'm not going to say that, chalk it up to being an easy one. But if they take care of business the next 2 weeks against the Titans and the Saints, I think things are back on track for their moderately tough end to their season. But if they lose even one of those games, now you're looking at, a 6-loss team going into a stretch with the Eagles and the Falcons in a division game to end the season. It could fall off the rails a little bit. So they got to figure out what's going on in Washington. They got to kind of develop on the fly their young quarterback, because the league has kind of schemed to him mid-season, which you don't see a lot with rookie quarterbacks, right? Like look at the kid in Houston. He had a great rookie season last year, and the league didn't really adjust to CJ mid-season. They adjusted to him year 2. But it looks like the league has adjusted a little bit to Jaden mid-season, rookie season, and he isn't responding the way you want him to. So they got to figure out a couple of wrinkles in Washington, Mo.
I think he struggled a little bit, but I really think the real problem in Washington is their defense is just vastly inconsistent. And the universe has a way of balancing things out. They weren't supposed to win that game versus Chicago, right?
No, they were not.
That's a fluke of a fluke. And then you watch the game on Sunday, and they did everything in their power to lose that game.
Yep.
Even when they made the miracle throw to McLaren and he scores, like, oh my God, what did I just see? And then the kicker brings you back to reality. Oh, you didn't see anything.
Right.
Their special teams and their defense cost them. Don't forget the kick return for a touchdown where the guy does almost like a 360 pivot, and then he runs it down their throats. And then on the onside kick, the guy catches it and just bursts through and runs it. I mean, their special teams killed them that game. So I do think Jaden Daniels has to readjust to the league, adjusting to him. But I think their biggest issue is on defense and special teams.
The Chiefs decided to play a close game against the Carolina Panthers for some reason. Not sure what the hell was happening over there. Props to Carolina for showing up for that game and not just being a doormat to the Kansas City Chiefs. Mo, I think we just have to accept that this is kind of what the Chiefs are. They're not going to blow teams out. Matt Mahomes even said after the game, man, I wish we were blowing teams out. It's a lot easier when we blow them out. But they're not built that way, which I've said this before. Is that not what the Patriots dynasty was in the midst of it? Patriots didn't blow teams out. Teams played them close.
Especially
and you always felt
3 titles.
Right. You always felt like we got a chance here. And you never did. You never did, because Tom always got the ball last, and Tom always did miracle things, or the defense made that amazing stop at the end of the game. Like it never worked out against the Patriots in the first half of their dynasty, because they were close games, and it never went your way. It felt like it always went Tom's way. And the Chiefs are very much playing that right now. I mean, you've seen it. They've played 11 games this season, and like 9 of them, they've been trailing by double digits at one point in the first half. and they've come back and won all of them but one. Like, it doesn't happen, Mo. People don't do this in the NFL. It doesn't matter what you do to the Chiefs. It looks like they're going to lose, and they keep pulling these games out to the tune of 10-1. So I think that's just what the Chiefs are this season. They're a team that's flawed. They're a team that, isn't going to blow teams out consistently. The games stay close. They try to control the clock and stay on the field as much as they can. And that's where we are.
I think that, but you know what? They just won a Super Bowl doing that.
Yeah.
They just, against a team in the Ravens that were world beaters on both sides of the football. And Patrick went into that AFC title game and said, I'm just going to control the clock. I'm just going to milk the clock. 4-yard pass, 6-yard pass, 3-yard pass, 4-yard scramble. And he manipulated the clock and allowed his defense to make plays. And that was a formula for them to win another Super Bowl. They don't look like world beaters, but to your point, much like the first half of that Patriots dynasty, they weren't world beaters. They just won every game that mattered. And
Right.
it wasn't always pretty, and it wasn't dominant looking. Most of the time it ended on an Adam Vinatieri field goal, but they count. Those wins count. And even though they don't look like world beaters, I'm of the opinion until you knock the Chiefs out, they're still the scariest team in the AFC.
Because, again, you have that conversation where you're like, on paper, Buffalo beat them earlier this season. And you say all those things. But the last thing you always say is, but. And
Right.
we're always going to have the but because they always seem to overcome. You look at what the Ravens, like you mentioned, last season, it was the Ravens' time. They had the best offense in the league. They had one of the best defenses in the league. Lamar Jackson was playing out of his freaking mind. It was a road game for the Chiefs. What more could you ask for? The Chiefs still find a way to win the game. And until someone does it, Mo, and there's only really been one guy to do it there's been two. One of them is Tom Brady. He's not around anymore. And the other is Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow.
So those are really the only two guys that have had playoff success against the Kansas City Chiefs. And newsflash, league, they're not going to see either of those guys this postseason. So someone better figure it out. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and company. Otherwise, it's going to be Mahomes and friends back in the Super Bowl. The Texans, Mo, we keep saying this. I think I might be a bigger proponent of this than you are. I don't trust them. I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. I was beating my drum in the offseason that CJ Stroud was going to regress. And if you look at CJ Stroud these last 2 or 3 games, he is not looking like CJ Stroud. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if there is an injury that we don't know about. But particularly the last 3 games for Houston, he just hasn't played well. I don't know if it's a mechanical thing. I don't know if he's in his own head. But he's not playing good football. And more importantly, he's not playing good football against bad football teams. And that's an issue. It's one thing if you're not playing your best football against stiffer competition, but when you're not playing your best football against bad teams and you're losing to the bad teams, that's something you got to figure out. And the one thing that benefits Houston is their division is absolutely garbage. And there's no way they're going to lose their division. So they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to win their division. They might do it with 7 or 8 or 9 losses, but their division is so bad it doesn't matter. So they have the rest of the season to figure it out, Mo. But I'm not scared of Houston in the playoffs as I see them.
It's weird that we knew that the league would adjust to Stroud. They always adjust to the rookie quarterbacks. He has not adjusted to the adjustment, and he has struggled throughout this season. The truth of the matter is the Texans have struggled because he hasn't played well. He is what's holding the team back with his inconsistency. And you can say they don't have the best offensive line, But the offensive line isn't making him hold onto the football too long. That's him doing it himself. He's going through his progressions way too slow. I just think it seems like the game has sped up and he hasn't adjusted to the speed of the game, which is weird, being a second-year quarterback. I think it's clearly been a down year for him to this point, but I'm with you. I do think they'll do enough to make the playoffs and win the division. But I don't think the Texans are a legitimate threat in the AFC. Like they were much scarier last year, and they got the doors beat out of them in the playoffs versus the Ravens. They really haven't been scary since last year. So I do think the concern going forward, if you're a Texans fan, is what Stroud does this coming off season, getting in the lab and getting better as a quarterback. Every play can't be an explosive play. Sometimes you have to take the 6-yard curl route or the 5-yard out. Sometimes that's what you do. You have to learn how to move the ball up the field that way. It just happens. I don't think he's made that adjustment yet.
And the Texans are going to know pretty quickly what their situation is in the AFC. They got the Jaguars this week, which, dear God, if they lose to the Jaguars, like we got bigger issues because that is actually worse than losing to the Titans at this point. But after the Jaguars, it's the Dolphins, the Chiefs, and the Ravens. And the Dolphins are fighting for a playoff spot. The Chiefs are the defending champs. And the Ravens are fighting for their division and are one of the best teams in the AFC. So it's no easy stretch. And then they close with the Titans again. So it's no easy stretch if you are the Texans right now, who are sitting at 7-5. And like I said, I think they could lose to the Dolphins, Chiefs, and Ravens and still win their division. Like, that's how bad their division is. They have 7 wins right now. As long as they beat the Jaguars and the Titans, they could lose those 3 games in the middle, go 9-8, and still make the playoffs, in my opinion, comfortably. Because I don't know how many games the rest of their division is going to win this season, especially if they're giving the Jaguars and the Titans another loss. So, but if you're the Texans, Mo, that's not the point. The point is you are a Super Bowl favorite. And we talked about this ad nauseum during the preseason of why they had a good run. They had a great rookie season from their quarterback, and we're just all of a sudden going to anoint CJ Stroud to MVP conversation, and all of a sudden we're going to anoint the Houston Texans. Oh, they're definitely playing the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. Pencil it in. Can CJ Stroud year 2 knock off Patrick Mahomes? People are such prisoners of the moment. And we consistently said that the league's going to adjust. He's not a bad quarterback. He's a good quarterback,
right?
But the league's going to adjust. Year 2 is probably going to be his worst year. And then year 3, we're going to see who he really is, because year 1 was the high, year 2's the low. And then everything after that is probably going to be who he is as a quarterback once he adjusts back to the league. Well, year 2 is the low, and he's not playing well. So yes, are they a playoff team? I absolutely think they are, because their division is horrible, but I wouldn't be surprised if they lose in the first round of the playoffs, Mo. Isn't that where we're trending right now? A one and done?
Yeah, I just think that their offense struggles so much mightily. We talk a lot about the importance of first and second down. They're god awful on first and second down. Like the Texans literally live in third and long. They set themselves up for failure. So I do think they'll make the playoffs. I think they get bounced from the playoffs. But look, again, it's a young team, and DeMeco Ryans is a young coach. You could say if the mission was they were supposed to be a Super Bowl contender, this is kind of a drop off. But I think that because it's a young team, is the opportunity there for them to get better? Yeah, your franchise quarterback is still 22. You're fine to me. He, like you said, he's got to put in the work. Year 3, you come back and you find out who he really is. Is he the guy that gives you 31 touchdowns, 10 picks, or is the guy that gives you 22 touchdowns, 17 or 18 picks? We'll find out for sure who he is in year 3.
And let's not forget, they're going to win the division. It's not a failure of a year by any stretch of the imagination. Right. They're going to win 9, 10, maybe 11 games. They're going to win the division. I just don't think they stack up with the other playoff teams that they're going to face in the AFC because we've seen some regression. But who knows, Mo? Maybe they figure it out. Maybe they get things cooking here in the last 5 or 6 games of the season, and come playoff time, they're a different team. It's possible. But like you said, I think he needs the offseason to kind of get in there and fine-tune some things. And then I think year 3 is the first real year you're going to see the Texans as a potential threat in the AFC. The Minnesota Vikings win a very close game with the Chicago Bears. Wins are wins. You got to take them as you can get them. Minnesota is one of those teams. And it's funny because we look at Minnesota and we're like, oh, man, they played a really close game against Chicago. Chicago isn't that great of a team. They probably should have beat. We thought Minnesota was going to win 3 games this season, people.
Right.
Like, let's not forget what we thought Minnesota was before the J.J. McCarthy injury. When J.J. McCarthy was going to be their starting quarterback this season, we were saying, oh, dear God, 3-4 wins. And then they turn the reins over to Sam Darnold, and you're like, well, at least they'll have consistent quarterback play. Maybe they'll win 5 games with Sam back there. And they're one of the best records in the NFC. So if I'm Minnesota, like, aren't we already playing with house money? No one thought you were going to. No one thought you were going to be in this position at the end of the season. I don't care how Minnesota wins. Find a way to win a game and move on, because no one thought you were going to be here, Mo.
There's no way a Vikings fan, if they're being honest, thought we're going to have one of the best records in the NFC this season. Not if they're being honest. I'm as surprised as anybody how well they've played at times offensively. To Flores' credit, the defense has been very good at times, and they do find a way to win football games. They're a strange team, because if you ask me, like, well, any playoff matchup, would you favor them? Even with their record, I wouldn't favor them. They're not world beaters. They win, though. I'll give they find ways. They've won ugly. They've been impressive at times. They're kind of Jekyll Hyde in their own right. But when they're at their best, it's when Sam Darnold has a clean game. They don't have to be explosive, but they usually don't beat themselves. And if you can carry that formula into the playoffs, you have a chance. If you don't turn the football over, you're already a threat to win a football game just on that alone, if you can play a clean football game. So it's a good football team. I don't look at them and go, well, Philly might be in trouble or Detroit's in trouble if they play Minnesota. I think anybody else could be in trouble against Minnesota, because I think the NFC is kind of wide open after that. But they're not a threat to be playing in the conference championship, in my opinion.
The maddening thing about the Vikings is they're very Jekyll and Hyde, but they're Jekyll and Hyde in the same game. Like, it's not like they win
Right.
and they, like the Rams. The Rams win one, they lose one, they win one, they lose one. Minnesota is like, first quarter, they're flawless. Second quarter, you're like, who is this team? This is not the team we just saw 15 minutes ago. They do it sometimes quarter to quarter, sometimes drive to drive, is how Jekyll and Hyde Minnesota is. But to their credit, most times they end it with the win. Right. They're 9-2. They have one of the best defenses in the league. So yeah, I get it. I don't think they're going to the NFC Championship game. But yet they keep finding ways to win. So we'll see what happens down the stretch. The Detroit Lions put in a very workmanlike effort, 24-6 over the Indianapolis Colts. Unfortunate for the Colts. I understand it was a tall task, Mo, but this was a chance to gain ground in that division in the playoff race. But it ended up being a really kind of worst case scenario. The Colts lose, the Dolphins win. So the Dolphins are catching up to them and actually pass them this week. And then with the surprise upset with the Tennessee Titans, the Colts lose a chance to gain ground in the division on Houston. So all around, just not a good week for the Indianapolis Colts. And Mo, we said it here last week. After all the praise we gave to Anthony Richardson, we left with the but. And that but was being, can he do it back-to-back games? And I understand that the Lions have a good defense, and I understand the Lions are a much better team talent-wise, but it was vintage, as Michael Cole would say, vintage Anthony Richardson out there. It just wasn't pretty.
And I think that's how the season will finish out. There will be highs with him. There will be lows. That roller coaster, that's the Anthony Richardson experience right now. And again, I can't foresee the future. He may end up being as good as Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. I I don't I don't think I'm wrong on this. I don't see that happening, but I understand if you're the GM why you have to commit to him because you put so much stock into where you drafted him. But for all the praise we gave him from what he did last week, he came out and he was the other side of what he is, right? And the bad, when you go bad and good, the bad is much worse than the good. Um, and in that division where you pointed out, not a strong division, it's there to be had. If you can't make ground up in that division, I, it's I just if I'm a Colts fan, I want to believe in the young man, but I don't think that he's going to put us in a position to compete for that division. Not this year, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with him next year.
And if you look at his stats, I mean, it's exactly what we've been saying he is. He completes 39% of his passes. He's not a good thrower of the football. We've said that consistently. But if you look at his average of those 11 completions, his average was almost 16 yards of completion. Because when he does complete passes, Mo, he's completing passes down the field. Because it's one of those things where it's off script. He's moving around. His defenders are getting open down the field, and he's got a cannon for an arm. So that's kind of where he thrives. He also had 10 carries for 61 yards, which means he was running around a lot. That's what you get with Anthony Richardson. You get a very athletically gifted quarterback who is able to change the game with his athleticism, moving around a lot. You get a quarterback that has a cannon of an arm. And if guys can get open off schedule, he can find them, 15, 20 yards down the field. But you also have a quarterback who cannot stand in the pocket and deliver a football for the life of him. And he cannot do that. And I'm sorry. I don't care how athletic he is. If he cannot stand in the quarterback, scan a defense, and deliver a football in 3.5 seconds or less, you don't have a quarterback. And you don't have a quarterback right now in Indianapolis.
I struggle with the notion that he completes 39% of his passes because I'm like, even average quarterbacks can dump the ball to their running backs,
Right.
or your
Right.
tight end.
Your tight end.
Like you should be able to complete over 50% of your passes if you make those reads. Like, let me dump it down to the back for a 4-yard completion or a 3-yard, whatever, a positive play, and he can't do that. And that's a game manager thing. Like all game managers can get the ball to the running back and the tight end. I struggle with how
Tommy Cutlets can do it.
Right. I just struggle how you can't, like, we kill Will Levis sometimes. Will Levis can get the ball to the running back and the tight end. Like, I don't understand that.
Will Levis completes 60% of his passes. Tommy Cutlets completes 60% of his passes.
Right. And I'm asking for 50. I'm not even asking for 60. Come on, man.
He can't read. And when it's not there, and I don't even want to say when his first look's not there, because I think he's 50-50 at best to complete a slant route, because he's not an accurate thrower of the football. If they're not wide open, if they're not college wide open, I think his default position is to start moving. And that's not winning football in the NFL. Your quarterback's default position cannot be to leave the pocket. It just doesn't work. You can say all you want about Michael Vick. Michael Vick could still throw a football. Yes, he had a cannon for an arm, but Michael Vick could also hit he could hit the in pattern. He could hit a crossing pattern. He could hit a slant if he needed to. Michael Vick was a better passer of the football than I think people give him credit for when he needed to be. Yes, was he run first? Yes, he was. But if you're comparing Michael Vick to Anthony Richardson, he's not even the passer that Michael Vick was. And most people would say Michael Vick was a subpar thrower of the football in the NFL. And Richardson's not even that, Mo. He's not even the Michael Vick level.
I feel like the way they run their offense, he makes one read. If it's not there, he runs.
Right.
I don't think he goes. I don't think he goes through progressions at all. I think he makes the first. If the first read isn't there, he takes off.
Speaking of Tommy Cutlets, I don't know what you Giants fans were thinking, because the rest of us saw it coming a mile away, and we knew it wasn't going to be pretty, and it wasn't pretty. Tommy Cutlets was cooked. The New York Giants were cooked. The Baker train is to 5-6. They're one game behind the Atlanta Falcons for the division. That's where we are. Baker and the Bucs played great. DeVito and the Giants played like we figured DeVito and the Giants played, which, Mo, if you're a Giants fan, bravo, because you need the number one pick in the draft. You need your pick. You need your pick of the quarterback lot, and you're one step closer to it.
No, I'd say, and I'm being sarcastic, mission accomplished. Going forward, that should be it. You don't want to use the word tank, but you do want the best draft pick you can possibly get.
And right now they're competing with at least one team that also needs a quarterback. That's the Raiders. So the 3 2-win teams right now, the Giants, the Raiders, and the Jaguars, you assume the Jaguars aren't taking a quarterback, so you're safe if they end up ahead of you. But if the Raiders end up ahead of you, they're taking the best quarterback in the draft, who they think the best quarterback is. So keep on losing. If you're the Giants, keep on losing. And then last but not least, Mo, on Thursday night, the Browns knock off the Steelers. We figured the Steelers were going to have a clunker at some point. I don't know if we thought it was going to be against the Cleveland Browns of all teams. But this is kind of what you get when you play, Steeler football. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors. We still think it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. We still don't think their offense is as good as the numbers they're putting up. Russell Wilson's going to have games like this. It was a blizzard out there. That definitely played part of a role in it. I don't think it played the entire role like George Pickens said it played after the game, saying that the Browns aren't a good team. And if the weather wasn't the weather, it'd be different. Maybe it would be different. But young man, you need to calm yourself down because you play this team again in a couple of weeks. Right. And if you don't think they're not going to have that bravado coming in of we just beat them 2 weeks ago and they said we're not a good team and we didn't deserve to win, it was because of the snow that we won, y'all better watch yourselves if you're Pittsburgh. Mo, I talked about this yesterday. I talked about the Steelers' schedule for the rest of the season, and Steeler fans don't want to hear this.
It's brutal.
But not only is it brutal, but they're at a little bit of a crossroads right now. So they got, as silly as this sounds, they got to beat the Bengals this week. Like, they need to beat the Bengals this week. And here's why. If they lose to the Bengals, next team you have is the Cleveland Browns coming to your house. You don't think on a 2-game losing streak after what you said about Cleveland, this is their Super Bowl, Mo. Cleveland coming into Pittsburgh with all the bad blood between those two teams after Cleveland just beat them at home in Cleveland, going to their home with them on a 2-game losing streak, possibly with a chance to knock them out of contention to win the division at that point. You don't think that's not going to be Cleveland's Super Bowl? That's going to be Cleveland's Super Bowl. And then after Cleveland's Super Bowl, oh, no big deal. You just play the Eagles, the Ravens, and the Chiefs. You can't lose these next 2 games. You need to win these next 2 games if you're Pittsburgh, because, Mo, I think they lose 2 out of 3 to the Eagles, the Ravens, and the Chiefs. So if you're going to lose 2 games there, you can't be losing the next 2. So they gotta take care of business the next 2 games.
I think they're must wins. I'm with you.
I agree. They can't have a slump here, and I think it starts with Cincinnati. If they lose to Cincinnati, I think they've opened the door to a collapse. I know that sounds hyperbolic, but if they lose to Cincinnati with what just went down with Cleveland and all the bulletin board material they're giving Cleveland with those 3 big games on the horizon, I think it could snowball really, really quick in Pittsburgh. Oh, and by the way, to Myles Garrett's point, where was TJ? This man disappears more than any other defensive player than maybe Micah Parsons. There are quarters, there are games where you just don't hear TJ Watt's name mentioned. So I don't take anything away from Myles Garrett for saying that, because he was right. There are whole games. Now, granted, Myles Garrett, you do that at times as well, my friend. But TJ Watt, you need to be a factor consistently on defense, my friend. But like I said, they beat Cincinnati, Mo. I think we're good. But if they lose to Cincinnati, I literally think they're walking to the edge of the cliff, giving Cleveland a chance to push them over and get that snowball running downhill. And that's not where you want to be if you're the Steelers.
I think you just called it. They have to beat the Bengals. More importantly, TJ Watt has to play like an all-pro. He's got to be a beast that game, because if Joe Burrow can plant his feet and launch the football, their secondary is going to get torn apart. They have to have Joe Burrow on his heels the entire football game. They play with such a small margin for error because they're not an explosive offensive football team. I think Russell gives them potential to make explosive plays down the field, but they're not a 30, 35 point. They're not that kind of football team. They play ball control, clock control, defense, and be opportunistic. When you play like that, everything's close to the vest. If you let a quarterback like Burrow, who can get hot, who's actually played great this season, if the Steelers get down something like 17-3 early, game's over. They're not built to walk you down from behind. So I think we always talk about their offense getting off to a fast start. TJ Watt and the defense need to get off to a fast start.
And Mo, let's not forget the Bengals have something to play for. They're at 7 losses right now. They're looking at this saying we basically need to win out to make a run for the playoffs. So not only is this a dangerous team with Joe Burrow, who, by the way, is getting MVP conversations around him, despite being on a 4-7 team. So that tells you the kind of season Joe Burrow is having. But not only is it a dangerous quarterback, it's a dangerous team who is going to view this as, if we lose this, we're probably out of the wild card race. If we win this, we're in it for another week. So you're going to be playing a very motivated Cincinnati Bengals team who's trying to keep their slim playoff hopes alive with a quarterback in Joe Burrow who's playing great football this season, while you're trying to kind of prevent yourself, if you're the Steelers, from having a rough end to the season with those 3 monster games coming up in a couple of weeks. So it's going to be interesting. And like I said, if the Bengals get a win here, you better buckle up, Pittsburgh fans, because it could be a really rough December for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Agreed.
All right, Mo, we're done today. We're going to take us to the close here.
Thank you guys so much for joining us this morning. Make sure you check out all the great content we have at Wire to Wire Network. Wire to Wire Network, we appreciate you.
Hey, make sure you're back here tomorrow, same time, same place. We're going to preview the entire NFL weekend. We're going to preview all the Thanksgiving Day matchups. We got a lot of football to preview here tomorrow. We're also going to get into a little NBA stuff. We got some WWE stuff to talk about. Survivor Series War Games is on the horizon, and the wise man is back, Mo.
Yes.
The wise man is back, and the story continues to evolve. And it continues to evolve in a logical way. And we're going to get to all of that tomorrow. All of that and more. Coffee and Sports. It's the morning show powered by Wire to Wire Network.